I thought I had built a safe home for my daughters, a quiet place, a refuge. We didn't have much, but we had love. I believed that was enough. Our mornings were always the same. I'd wake up before the girls, pour myself a cup of coffee, and sit for a few precious minutes in the silence. Just me, the ticking clock, and the sound of the city waking up outside. Then came the rush, Lily looking for her other shoe, Emma begging for waffles, school lunches thrown together in the usual last-minute scramble. Richard would come in from the bedroom, already dressed, already distant. "Morning," he'd say. "Morning," I'd answer. And that was it. I told myself he was tired. Work was stressful. Middle age was hard. He still kissed me goodbye, even if it was just a brush on the cheek. He still smiled at the girls. That had to mean something, right? I was 62 when I gave birth to Lily. People thought I was crazy. Some even said it to my face. But after years of praying and waiting, they were my miracle. Two brown-skinned girls with wide eyes and soft voices who needed me more than anyone ever had. And I needed them too. They were the reason I kept going, the reason I kept believing. Richard had always been charming. That was part of the problem. People loved him, especially women. But I believed in us. I believed in our family. So I kept cooking dinners. I kept folding laundry. I kept praying. I kept pretending everything was okay. I didn't know then that the foundation under my feet was already crumbling. Looking back, there were signs, little ones, the late-night texts, the sudden work trips, the way he stopped asking me about my day, but I ignored them. I wanted peace more than I wanted the truth. That morning the sun came through the kitchen window just like always. Lily laughed at something Emma said, and for a moment I believed we were exactly where we were meant to be. But behind my back, something was happening that would shatter everything. Some people think sacrifice is loud, something grand and noble that people notice. But in my life, it's always been quiet, invisible even, like setting aside your dreams without complaint, like getting up at 5 a.m. to pack school lunches no one will thank you for, like loving a man who's already halfway gone just because your daughters still call him Daddy. The days blurred together back then. School drop-offs, grocery runs, homework. Emma had a science fair coming up, and Lily was rehearsing a poem for class. They needed me constantly, and I gave them everything I had, every ounce of energy, patience, and love. Most nights, I didn't even sit down to eat. I just stood at the counter, making sure they were fed, clean, and settled. By the time I got to my own plate, it was cold. Richard, on the other hand, seemed to grow more distant with every passing week. He still came home, technically, but his mind was always elsewhere. He'd walk in with that tired look, barely say a word, eat quietly, and disappear into the bedroom with his phone. No conversation, no warmth, not even the small courtesies we used to take for granted. "Work's been crazy," he said once when I asked. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. He started working weekends too, and even when he was home, he wasn't really here. He missed Emma's school recital. He forgot Lily's parent-teacher meeting. I reminded him twice. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just smiled through it, because mothers are supposed to hold things together, especially black mothers, especially women like me who had waited a lifetime for their children. So I pushed down the ache and carried on. But something was shifting, even if I couldn't name it yet. I began to notice the way he looked at his phone, how he'd angle the screen away when I walked by, how he'd laugh at messages I couldn't see, how he never asked me how I was doing. It was like I had become part of the furniture, useful, reliable, always there, but unnoticed. One night I found myself standing alone in the hallway, listening to the sound of him laughing through the closed bathroom door. He was on the phone with someone. He didn't know I was nearby. He hadn't laughed like that with me in a long time. I went back to the kitchen and washed the dishes in silence. The next morning, I watched him tie his tie in the mirror. He looked good, too good for someone just going to the office. I wanted to ask him who she was. I wanted to scream, "Where did you go?" But instead, I packed his lunch. Turkey sandwich, no mayo, just the way he liked it. And I handed it to him with a smile so steady it scared me. At the time, I thought he was just tired. I was so wrong. They say the eyes never lie, and I believe that now. There was a time when Richard looked at me like I was home. Even when we were tired or stressed or broke, there was still a softness in his eyes, a knowing, a shared history, a kind of love you don't say out loud, but feel in the quiet. That look disappeared slowly, not overnight. It faded like color from a photograph left too long in the sun. One evening we sat at the dinner table, just the four of us. The girls were chattering about their day. Emma was bragging about spelling all her vocabulary words right, and Lily was playing with her peas. And Richard, he was somewhere else. He stared down at his plate, chewing without tasting, checking his phone under the table every few minutes. I watched him while I stirred my mashed potatoes. He didn't notice. He hadn't looked at me all night. "Daddy, are you listening?" Emma asked. He looked up, startled. "Yeah, baby, I'm listening." But he wasn't. Later that night, while folding laundry in our bedroom, I saw his phone buzz on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I never had. We had always trusted each other, or at least I trusted him. But something about the way he snatched it up, the quick glance, the slight smirk before turning away. It made my stomach twist. He walked into the bathroom and I stood there holding a pair of his socks in my hands, frozen. I didn't want to be that woman, the one who snoops, who accuses, who begs for answers she's not ready to hear. So I said nothing. That weekend, he said he had to go into the office. Saturday morning. I packed the girls into the car to take them to the park, and he left before us, wearing cologne he hadn't used in months. I noticed. Of course I noticed. At the park, while the girls climbed the jungle gym, I sat on the bench watching other families, laughing, talking, holding hands, and all I could think was, when did I stop being his person? He came home late that night. He didn't apologize, just said traffic had been bad and went straight to the shower. While he was in there, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap, staring at the carpet like it might offer answers. He came out humming. It hit me then. He was happy. Not the tired kind of contentment we sometimes had after a long week. Not the peaceful kind that comes from your kids being healthy and your bills paid. No, this was a different happiness. Lighter, private, and I wasn't part of it. That night while he slept beside me, I lay awake and prayed. Not for him to stop, not even for the truce. I just prayed for strength, because my heart already knew. You don't need to see her face to know she's there. Sometimes a woman just knows. At first it was in the little shifts. Richard started working late more often. Then it was out-of-town meetings. Then came the passwords, new ones on his phone, his laptop, even his email. He'd never bothered before. We used to share everything. One evening I walked into our bedroom and saw him typing furiously on his phone. He didn't hear me at first. When he did, he jumped, turned the screen away, and forced a smile. "Just work stuff," he said. But the way his thumb hovered over the screen before hitting send told me it wasn't. I didn't ask. I think I was afraid of the answer. There's something humiliating about watching a man love someone else from across the same dinner table. I'd look at him and feel like a guest in my own life. He was slipping away, and no one else seemed to see it. One night I was folding laundry in the living room after the girls had gone to bed. He came in late, said nothing, walked right past me. But as he passed, I caught a scent. It wasn't mine, it was floral, expensive, strong enough to linger after he was gone. I stood there with a towel in my hands, heart pounding. I wasn't imagining things anymore. She had been in his car. She had been close enough to touch him. And now her scent was in my home. I didn't cry. I just sat down on the edge of the couch and stared at the dark television screen. My reflection looked like a stranger, tired, older, not the woman I used to be. The next day, I found a gold foil wrapper from a fancy chocolate bar tucked in his jacket pocket, something he never ate, something we didn't buy, and a receipt from a downtown cafe, 2 lattes, 1 pastry, 2. That evening, I watched him walk through the door and set his keys on the counter like nothing was wrong. I made dinner, helped Lily with her reading, checked Emma's math homework. Then I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at the floor until my vision blurred. I wasn't just sharing my husband. I was sharing my home, my peace, my life, with a ghost I couldn't touch but felt everywhere. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay beside him, our backs not touching, and I imagined her. I wondered if she laughed at his jokes, if she touched his face the way I used to, if he looked at her the way he stopped looking at me. Morning came. I made breakfast like always, braided Lily's hair, zipped Emma's backpack. And I told myself, you don't know for sure, but deep down, I did. Because I'd smelled her perfume on his shirt. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that starts so normal you don't see the storm coming. I had just dropped the girls at school and was doing laundry like always. The smell of soap filled the room, clean, familiar, comforting. I sorted through Richard's clothes like I'd done 1,000 times before. Shirts, slacks, undershirts, socks. And then I saw it, a white dress shirt, wrinkled, balled up tight at the bottom of the basket. I unfolded it without thinking, and there it was. A faint smear of lipstick near the collar. Not pink, not subtle, red, bold. The kind I never wore. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe it was something else. Ketchup, maybe. A marker from one of the girls. But I knew better. My hands started to shake, not violently. Just enough to feel like the ground beneath me wasn't solid anymore. I sat on the edge of the washing machine and held the shirt in my lap, like it might give me answers. But it only gave me silence. I don't know how long I stayed there. Minutes, maybe longer. The hum of the dryer was the only sound in the room. I pressed the shirt to my chest and closed my eyes. And for the first time in months, I let the truth in. Not just into my head, but into my bones. He was with her. Not just emotionally, not just in passing. He was with her. And I had been doing his laundry, cooking his meals, smiling through his lies. The betrayal was so quiet, so domestic. It didn't come with slammed doors or screaming matches. It came with a red stain on a shirt I washed with my own hands. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I stood up, walked to the sink, and scrubbed the collar like it would make a difference. The stain faded, but it didn't disappear. Neither did the ache. Later that night, I sat across from him at the dinner table. He talked to Emma about her science project, nodded while Lily told a story about recess, and I watched him like a stranger. His smile, his voice, his hands, they didn't belong to me anymore. I wondered if she had met our daughters in his mind, if he imagined them while lying beside her, if she knew about the soft way Lily says "mama" when she's half asleep, if she knew what kind of man he was when he wasn't pretending. After dinner, I tucked the girls into bed. Lily held onto my hand a little longer than usual. Emma asked, "Are you okay, Mama?" "I'm fine, baby," I whispered, and I kissed her forehead like I wasn't breaking inside. Later, alone in the bathroom, I finally let the tears come. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, quiet. They fell into the sink while I gripped the edge and tried to breathe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to ask him why. But I chose silence. Because sometimes silence is stronger than rage. Because I still had 2 little girls sleeping down the hall who needed to wake up to peace. Because I knew this was the moment everything changed. After that day, something inside me closed. Not shattered, not burned, just closed. Like a door that no longer needed to be opened. I didn't confront Richard. I didn't demand explanations. There were no ultimatums, no tearful scenes. I simply went quiet. But I watched him, and I watched myself too. How I smiled when I didn't feel like smiling. How I kept the house running like nothing had changed. How I shielded the girls from every piece of the wreckage I was hiding in my chest. That was my real job now, not folding clothes or cooking dinner, not pretending to be a wife. My job was to be their mother, fully, fiercely, unbreakable in front of them, even when I was falling apart behind closed doors. Lily was the first to sense something. She started crawling into bed with me in the middle of the night again, like she did when she was little. She'd slip under the blanket, tuck her cold feet between my legs, and whisper, "I missed you, Mama." And I'd hold her, blink back tears in the dark, and whisper back, "I'm right here." Emma started asking harder questions. Why doesn't Dad eat with us anymore? Why is he always on his phone? Did you and Daddy fight? I'd tell her the same thing every time. Grown-up stuff, baby. Nothing for you to worry about. And she'd nod, but I could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe me. Children feel everything, even when they don't have the words. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, I found myself in the kitchen, wiping down a clean counter. Not because it was dirty, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Richard hadn't come home yet. He hadn't even called. And in that silence, I looked up at the window over the sink. The reflection stared back at me, tired, faded, but not weak. And I said to myself, out loud for the first time, "You are still here." That night, I knelt beside my bed. Not to beg, not even to question, just to say thank you. Thank you for 2 daughters who needed me. Thank you for a spine that was still holding me up. Thank you for the kind of strength no one sees, but that never breaks. The next morning, I made the girls pancakes, even though we were running late. Lily danced in the kitchen in her socks. Emma read the syrup label out loud like it was poetry, and I smiled. A real smile. Not because things were okay, but because I had decided I would not let his choices destroy their home. Not my girls, not this family, not me. For them, I had to survive. I wasn't looking for her. It was just a regular Saturday. The girls and I had run out of cereal and dish soap, so we made a quick trip to the store after breakfast. Target, bright lights, long aisles, too many choices. Lily wanted to push the cart. Emma insisted on holding the list. I was distracted, half listening as they argued over snacks, when I turned down the coffee aisle and saw her. I didn't know her name, but I knew who she was. She was laughing, holding a to-go cup in one hand and tapping on her phone with the other. Sleek ponytail, tight jeans, a cream-colored blouse that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. Everything about her was polished, effortless, younger. She was standing close, too close, to a man I recognized. Not Richard, but someone he worked with. I'd seen them together at a holiday party 2 years back. And then she looked up. Our eyes met. She paused. Just long enough for me to know she recognized me too. There it was, that small, calculated smile. Not apologetic, not ashamed, triumphant, like she had already won. I stood frozen for a beat. Then I looked away, turned to the girls and said, "Let's grab the juice and go." We left the aisle in silence. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't cry. I didn't turn back. But I knew. That was her, the woman who had been in my husband's car, in his thoughts, maybe even in his arms the night before. She wasn't stunning, not in the way magazines pretend beauty works, but she had presence, that kind of ease women carry when they believe the world owes them nothing but desire. She didn't need to say a word. Her smile said it all, and I hated that I felt small next to her. Back at home, while the girls watched cartoons, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and studied myself. My edges were growing in gray again. There were lines at the corners of my mouth I hadn't noticed before. My eyes looked tired, older, real. I wasn't her. And maybe that's what he wanted. Something shiny, something simple, someone without stretch marks or early bedtimes. But I was the one folding school uniforms, packing lunches, carrying the emotional weight of this family day after day, year after year. I didn't envy her. I pitied her. Because what she didn't know is that the man she'd stolen had nothing left to give. And what he didn't know is that I was beginning to find something he had lost a long time ago, myself. I walked out of that bathroom, kissed my daughters on the forehead, and sat between them on the couch. I held them close while the cartoons played, and I whispered inside my own mind, so quiet only God could hear it. She may have him, but I still have what matters. You don't always fall with noise. Sometimes the collapse is quiet, so quiet no one hears it but God. It was a Sunday morning. Richard left early, said he had something to take care of. Didn't say what. Didn't ask if we wanted to go to church together like we used to. I got the girls dressed, fixed Emma's collar, brushed Lily's edges, and smiled through it. Dropped them off at my neighbor Susan's. She offered to watch them so I could have a couple hours to myself. She said I looked tired. I told her I was fine. We both knew I was lying. I didn't drive far. Just down the street, to the small red brick church I hadn't stepped inside in months. The parking lot was almost empty. The Sunday service had already ended. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want hugs or prayers or polite smiles. I just needed silence. The sanctuary was quiet when I walked in. Only a few lights on. The air smelled of wood polish and old hymnals. I sat in the back row, the same pew where I had once held Richard's hand during Easter, the same pew where I had once whispered thank yous after Lily was born safe, after Emma took her first steps, after our mortgage was finally paid off. Now my hands were empty, and I had no words. At first I just sat there, staring at the stained glass window near the altar. The colors looked different somehow, colder, distant. And then it came. A wave I couldn't stop. Tears slipped down my face before I could wipe them away. My shoulders shook, not with rage, not with anger, just grief. Deep, soul-tired grief. I buried my face in my hands and let the silence hold me. The kind of silence only a sacred space can carry. I wasn't just crying for the betrayal. I was crying for every time I'd swallowed my voice. For every birthday party I planned alone. For every dinner he missed. For every night I had laid beside a man who wasn't with me. I cried because I had given so much of myself away and never asked for it back. At some point, I whispered into the stillness, "Why, God?" Not with bitterness, not even with expectation, just with the voice of a woman whose heart had finally cracked open. I didn't hear an answer, no voice from heaven, no burning bush, but I felt something, not peace, not yet, but a steadiness, like the floor under me wasn't going to give way, like I could fall, but not all the way. I sat there until the tears stopped, until the silence felt less like emptiness and more like space. And then I stood up. My legs were shaky, my eyes swollen, but I stood. Because even in the quietest collapse, there comes a moment, small and fragile, when you realize you're still breathing. That moment was mine. I left the church without fanfare. No one saw me come, and no one saw me go. But everything inside me had shifted. That night I put the girls to bed, kissed their cheeks, and lingered in the doorway, watching them sleep. 2 small lives, so full of trust, so full of love, I had forgotten I deserved 2. And in the stillness of my room, I made a decision. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't break, and I wouldn't let his choices define my story. That night, I decided I would not fall. I didn't grow up with much, but I did grow up with faith. My grandmother used to say, "Baby, you don't wait for the storm to pass. You learn to pray in the rain." I didn't understand her back then, but I do now. A few days after I broke down in that empty church, I went back. This time, during the week. No service, no choir, just me and the quiet again. I sat in the back, same seat, and this time, someone else was there, Pastor John. He was sweeping the front of the sanctuary, slow and steady, like it was part of his daily rhythm. He didn't look surprised to see me. He just smiled, soft, knowing, like he'd been expecting me all along. "Afternoon, Sister Maggie," he said, setting the broom aside. I hadn't heard my name said with that much warmth in a long time. "Hi, Pastor," I said, my voice barely there. He walked toward me and sat a few pews up, turned slightly to face me without pressing too close. We sat in silence for a few moments before he spoke again. "You don't have to tell me what brought you in," he said gently. "But if you want to, I'll listen." I didn't tell him everything. Not about the lipstick, the late nights, the perfume. But I told him enough. He nodded slowly, not judging, not rushing me. Then he said, "Sometimes God allows things to break, so we stop leaning on what was never holding us up to begin with." That hit me somewhere deep. "I thought I was doing everything right," I whispered. I stayed. I gave. I forgave things I probably shouldn't have. Pastor John leaned forward slightly. "You loved, and love isn't weakness. Don't let a broken man make you doubt your strength." I let that sit for a while. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd given away quietly, piece by piece, in the name of survival. And I hadn't realized how heavy it was to carry someone else's sin like it was mine to fix. "But what now?" I asked. "I can't undo what's happened. I can't make him change." "No, you can't," he said. "But you can decide who you want to be on the other side of this." And then he said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes God breaks us open, just enough for something new to grow." That was the moment something inside me began to shift. Not a miracle, not a lightning bolt, just a small, steady breath I didn't know I still had. I left the church lighter than I came in, not because the situation was fixed. He was still lying, still hiding. But I wasn't hiding anymore. That night I sat with the girls at the table and really looked at them. Emma was humming while doing her homework. Lily was focused, tongue poking out the side of her mouth as she drew a picture of the 3 of us under a rainbow. And I thought, they don't need me perfect. They just need me present, whole, honest, alive. So I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. Faith over fear. And I underlined it twice. That was the first step back to myself. Not to who I used to be, but to the woman I was becoming. Revenge doesn't always come in flames. Sometimes it looks like peace, quiet, steady, unbothered. After that talk with Pastor John, I didn't go home and pack my bags. I didn't confront Richard with scripture or rage. I didn't break the dishes or scream down the hallway. I just changed. Not all at once, but piece by piece. It started small. I scheduled a haircut, not because I needed to impress anyone, just because I wanted to look in the mirror and see someone who was trying again. The gray stayed. I earned every strand. But I had them shape it into something soft, something bold. And when I looked at my reflection afterward, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I pulled out the sewing machine I hadn't touched in years, Started mending things, not just clothes, but time. I repaired a curtain hem, then Emma's old jacket, then Lily's favorite doll dress. I cleaned out the closet, donated what no longer fit, not just fabric, but expectations. Let go of old hopes that had started to rot in silence. Then one morning I woke up early, poured myself a cup of coffee, and opened my laptop. Typed in remote part-time jobs for older women. I hadn't worked in years, didn't think I had much to offer outside of this house, but I knew how to organize, how to manage chaos, how to care. Turns out that's a skill. I found a local nonprofit looking for help with scheduling and phone calls, flexible hours, modest pay, but it was mine. The woman who interviewed me over Zoom said, "You seem grounded, like someone who gets things done." She didn't know how much I had been holding up with one hand while stirring soup with the other. I started waking up before Richard. Made coffee for myself, not for both of us. I left sticky notes on the fridge. Not reminders for him, but affirmations for me. You are more than this. God is not finished with you. Peace is power. The girls noticed the difference. Emma hugged me one night and said, "You're smiling more now." And I realized she was right. Richard didn't notice. He was still glued to his phone, still working late, still offering empty smiles and half-hearted excuses. But I had stopped waiting for him to change. He'd walk into the house and not even realize I had rearranged the furniture. I moved the armchair he never used into the girls' reading corner, took down the old wedding photo from the hallway, and replaced it with a drawing Lily made of the three of us. He didn't say a word. And that was fine. Because this wasn't for him. This was for me. For the version of myself I had buried under years of compromise and quiet suffering. Some days, I still felt the sting. The ache didn't vanish. It just moved to a place I could live with. But I had stopped bleeding, and every time I got a paycheck, no matter how small, I smiled. Every time I looked in the mirror and saw a woman rebuilding her own life from scratch, I felt something close to pride. Richard didn't even notice, but I was no longer the same woman. And that was my silent revenge. I didn't plan it. There was no grand speech rehearsed in the mirror. No dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a Wednesday. Just me, finally ready. Richard came home later than usual, again. I was sitting in the living room with the lamp on, a book open on my lap I wasn't reading. The girls were already asleep. The house was quiet, still, waiting. He walked in with his keys jingling and the same tired excuse half-formed on his lips. "Sorry, work ran late," he mumbled, not looking at me. I closed the book gently and set it aside. "Sit down," I said, calm as a whisper. He looked at me surprised, hesitated, then sat. For the first time in a long time, we looked at each other. Really looked. He didn't know what was coming. But I did. "I know," I said. His face twitched. "Know what?" I tilted my head, still calm. "All of it, I know." Silence. Then came the defensiveness, like clockwork. "Maggie, look, if you're feeling neglected, we can talk about that. But don't start accusing me of things that aren't—" "I'm not accusing you," I interrupted. He stopped. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm done fighting for someone who walked away a long time ago." He leaned back, crossed his arms. "So what is this then? A guilt trip?" I smiled. Not cruel, not sad, just tired. "No, Richard, this is goodbye." He blinked, uncrossed his arms. His mask slipped just enough for me to see confusion, maybe even panic beneath it. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't need this anymore. You anymore. Whatever this marriage has become, it's not home." He shook his head, reaching for something to grab control again. "Maggie, we have kids. You can't just—" "I'm not leaving the girls," I said, steady. but I'm done pretending you're still part of this family." His eyes narrowed. "So what? You want a divorce now? After everything you've been through, now you're going to throw it all away?" That made me laugh. Soft. Bitter. "No, Richard. You threw it away. I just finally stopped picking up the pieces." He stood up then, like posture would give him power. But it didn't work anymore. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You'll regret this." I stood too, but not to argue. I walked past him toward the hallway. And before I turned the corner, I said one last thing. "You thought I'd stay broken, but I learned something in the silence. I don't need to raise my voice to rise." The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table with the girls. They laughed about something Emma said, syrup on their fingers, sun in their hair. Richard was gone before they woke. They didn't ask where he was. I didn't tell them everything, not yet. But they knew. Children always know. That afternoon, I packed up the last things of his he hadn't bothered to take. A drawer of old receipts, a pair of cufflinks, a book he never finished. I placed it all in a box, set it by the door, and moved on. No shouting, no revenge, no scene, just freedom. That day I walked away with my daughters holding my hands, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Some wounds don't leave bruises. They leave silence. Long, aching silence. But in that silence, I found myself. It's been months since that night I let go. Since I stopped begging for love that didn't love me back. Since I stopped shrinking to make space for someone who had already stepped out the door. Now my mornings are slower. I still make coffee at sunrise, but I don't rush to clean up someone else's mess. The house is quieter, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels full of breath, of laughter, of freedom. The girls are growing fast. Emma's reading bigger books. Lily wants to be a painter now. They ask fewer questions about their father. I give fewer answers. Some stories don't need retelling, they need replacing. We go to the park on Sundays, just the three of us. Sometimes we pack sandwiches, sometimes just juice and crackers. We sit on a blanket, the sun on our faces, the wind in our hair. And I watch them run, carefree, loud, alive. I used to think I needed to be everything for everyone. Now I know I just need to be present, whole, honest, myself. I thought I needed Richard to keep this family together. But the truth is, we were already a family. He just chose not to stay. And that's not my shame to carry anymore. I've learned to love without losing myself, to forgive without forgetting who I am, to fall apart and rebuild, not for a man, not for appearances, but for me. I still have days when it hurts, days when the memory creeps in, uninvited. But I breathe through it. I remind myself I survived. Not because I'm strong all the time, but because I kept standing even when I didn't want to. I was betrayed, but I was never defeated. So if you're reading this, if your heart has ever been broken in silence, if you've ever smiled through pain, if you've ever felt invisible inside your own home, I see you, and you're not alone. Tell me your story. Speak it out loud or write it down. Let it bleed. Let it breathe. Because when we tell the truth, we take our power back. We rise together.